This meeting
All
is being
righty.
recorded.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for CCIA's Risk Management Committee's webinar about how to prevent large property losses from killing your cannabis business. So I appreciate everybody joining us, both CCIA members and non-members alike. If you are unfamiliar with CCIA, my name is Justin McCarthy. I'm a staffer over on the CCIA team. We are a statewide federally registered nonprofit trade association. We've been celebrating our 10-year next year, which is pretty exciting. We've been around since 2013, doing a lot of the legislative and regulatory work at the state capitol, really building foundational relationships to help unify the cannabis voice at the at the state level in Sacramento to be able to help push sensible laws and regulations forward. And one of the ways we do that is by leveraging our committees and our amazing members. So we have about 8 different committees that works on, like I said, those reg and ledge priorities, but also various forms of educational content, whether it be webinars, white papers, blog spots, everything of the like. Our CCIA Risk Management Committee has been around for about 5 or 6 years now, putting on quite a bit of educational content. So we are excited to be able to bring this forward to you guys in terms of how to prevent those large property losses from really affecting your business. So I'll pass it over to Doug in a second, but just in terms of a little bit of house cleaning, this is recorded. This will be available after the fact on the CCIA website in about 48 hours or so. So we will be emailing that out to everybody and be able to share that as a resource. So if you have anybody that you think would be applicable in terms of watching this, definitely be on the lookout for that. And with this being a webinar, attendees are not able to unmute themselves. So if you have any questions, definitely put them in the Q&A or chat boxes, and we will be able to forward that over to the panelists. We will do what we can to answer some in real time as it's sort of applicable to what's being discussed, but we will have some time at the end of the webinar for sort of specific Q&As that you may have. So appreciate everybody joining us, and I will pass it over to our moderator and co-chair of the Risk Management Committee and co-chair for a few years now, Doug Esposito of Assured Partners.
Justin, thank you. And thank you for the CCIA. I am the co-chair of the CCIA's Risk Management Committee, and we have been very active. We're a group of everything from brokers to attorneys to operators to CPAs, insurance carriers, and the like. And today, obviously, the topic, I hope we got your attention a little bit with how to prevent large property losses from killing your cannabis industry, because it truly can happen. Most of us know you can't get loans easily. So if the insurance asset isn't there to protect you, truly, you could go insolvent. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce my moderators, and I'll just briefly introduce them, and then they can tell a little bit about themselves. But starting off first, we have Kelly Yates with Topa Insurance. Topa Insurance is a very niche cannabis insurance company, but Kelly.
Hi, thanks, Doug. My name is Kelly Yates. I'm the Vice President of Claims at Topa Insurance Company. As Doug mentioned, small carrier here in California. And we work with our agency partner, Cannassure. And through Cannassure, we've been selling cannabis-specific insurance products for the last 5 years. And so my team and I have been honored to work on cannabis claims across the country. I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Doug.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. And next we have George Elias with Golden Bear Insurance Company.
Thanks, Doug. Thank you, and thanks for the CCIA for arranging this webinar. My name is George Elias. I'm the Property Claims Manager and Head of Property Claims here at Golden Bear Insurance Company. Golden Bear Insurance Company is the first admitted carrier to write cannabis business in the state of California, and we don't just write in the state of California, we write in all the states where cannabis was legalized and we're able to conduct business in. Again, I'm really excited to be presenting alongside Ian and Kelly about how to prevent your large property losses from killing your cannabis business and how insurance plays a major role in that. Thank you.
Awesome. And then last, but definitely not least, our legal eagle. A lot of you might know Ian Stewart with Wilson Elser.
Thanks, Doug. Great to be with everybody here today, George and Kelly. So I'm Ian Stewart. I chair the cannabis and hemp practice at Wilson Elzer. So we're a national firm. I'm based in Los Angeles, and I've been on the risk management insurance committee with CCIA now for a few years, and looking forward to discussing this really important topic of property losses, which are, I think, the primary source of business killers today in the industry.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ian, George, and Kelly, for sure. Appreciate it. So we're going to go through some set questions, obviously, and then we'll probably leave about 10 minutes from Q&A. But as Justin said, feel free to text those in the chat box, and we'll get to them, definitely as we can. But Ian, starting with you, I mean, what types of claims, losses, what have we been looking at for the last 2 years or so in the marketplace?
Sure. So let's set the stage a little bit. We're going to be doing I promise everybody, we're not going to get too deep into very wonky insurance issues, but we do have to discuss a few things that are, that are specific to insurance policies and so forth. And, this is stuff that I think, everybody needs to hear, because it's the primary source of disputes, is when you don't understand what's in the policies. And so when we're talking about property losses, we're generally talking about property insurance policies, as opposed to other forms of policies, like third-party general liability policies, or product liability, or auto, or work comp. So when we're talking about property losses, typically it's a loss that happens to you, the business owner, and you're the claimant, and you make a direct claim, which is called a first-party claim, directly to the insurance carrier. And then the insurance carrier has the obligation, and it's a fiduciary relationship, to respond, investigate, and then, as appropriate, pursuant to the terms, pay out the claims. So we now have, a loss history and a pretty good accounting in the cannabis industry of what these losses have looked like over the last 5 years or so, especially here in California. And what we can say is that, without a doubt, the largest source of payouts, claims and payouts to the industry, have been around property losses, and it's primarily fires and thefts, and some other things as well. But I mean, fires and thefts certainly account for the lion's share of the losses. And I think what we've also seen are a few misperceptions about where those losses come from. So certainly the fires, I think we can all agree, are primarily with cultivators, although certainly manufacturing entities as well have seen some fires. Less so on, if it's purely a warehouse operation, or if it's retail, although, it can happen, but that would be a risk like other businesses face. On the theft side, however, I think the biggest disconnect is, we hear a lot about retail and retail theft, and certainly that's happened. And continues to happen, because those are public-facing businesses. But I think what we've seen, I think collectively with TOPA and Golden Bear, is that some of the larger thefts have happened at cultivators and manufacturers, something that's a little bit less public-facing. These are businesses that are in commercial zones, and they tend to have larger losses, and sometimes they can be inside jobs. They can be coordinated attacks that are fairly sophisticated, and that can result these days with some of the larger companies in multi-million-dollar theft claims. And again, that can hamper or even kill the business if it's not covered. And we'll talk about some of those primary coverage obstacles a bit later.
Thank you, Ian. And George, I mean, anything to add to Ian's high-level assessment? For example, I mean, are carriers paying these claims? I mean, are monies flowing outwards and getting back to the insureds?
Well, the answer to that question is definitely yes. Otherwise, we would not have a job, me and Kelly. So to rest assured, you're in safe hands when you're insured with TOPA or with Golden Bear. Our job is to pay you fairly and just to get you back whole. The first word that I hear when I speak to my insureds is insurance is confusing. And frankly speaking, we do not expect you as our clients and insureds to be experts in the industry. You would be having an agent who is specialized and at the same time we as claims people, we will help you guide through the whole process of the claims. However, it would be beneficial for you to know some items in the policy. So here, first off, the first question is, what is covered property? This question arises when you're purchasing the policy. So you can purchase building coverage if you're the landlord or there's a contractual obligation for you to insure the building. You can insure your business, person, or property, and that's any business, person, or property you use to conduct your business other than your cannabis stock. So anything that you have in your business to conduct the business except the cannabis stock. Next is going to be your tenants, improvements, and betterments. A lot of lease agreements would obligate you as a tenant to a location to ensure your property and enhancements and improvements and betterments to a building that you implement at your own cost. So this is another line of coverage that you can purchase. You have definitely the most important coverage that we provide, and every insurer in the cannabis industry should provide, which is the cannabis stock. So your cannabis stock, whether it's living plants, harvested plants, oil and extracts in the manufacturing process, or finished products, these are all falling under the cannabis stock coverage. We have finally property of others. We've seen multiple operations that store cannabis for another operation. So storing that cannabis, it's not your property, it's property of others in your care, custody, and control, and you can purchase coverage for that type of property as well. The next item, which is essential when we are speaking about avoiding killing your business, is the business income, and how that plays a very important role for you when there is a big loss that happens and you're not able to sell and conduct the business the same way you did pre-loss. And here, I'm not going to dive into evaluations and stuff in the business income loss, but there are two very important things for you to know when we're speaking about business income. One, a clear accounting record help us drastically in the claim evaluation. When we have information that are easily accessed, quickly accessed, this helps us in the evaluation. And the other thing that I wanted to step on as well is that we would be assigning an expert in the accounting field to help you evaluate your claim. It's not in safe hands, or somebody would not look into that. It's going to be in experts' hands in the accounting field, and they are going to be evaluating your claim based on the history that we have before the loss. One other thing I wanted to touch on as well is co-insurance. This is a very complicated item to speak about. However, speaking about co-insurance is as simply as that. You have a building that is worth $1 million. Now, you went to an insurance company and said, okay, for any purpose, one of them that we've seen is lowering your premium. I want to insure my building for $500,000. Now, you're not insuring 100% of your building. That doesn't mean that you're going to be paid 100% of your loss. It means, think of it that way. You have 50% insurance with Golden Bear and 50% insurance with yourself. When you have that situation, you're going to be contributing in the loss the same way Golden Bear does. And again, that's taking off any technicalities based on the percentage of the co-insurance, but that's how it is. Another item of discussion.
George, if I may too. So in a nutshell, everyone, I mean, when you have co-insurance on your policy, and a lot of them do have it, I mean, really highlight that and settle in with your broker to really discuss the nuances, because in essence, it is a penalty for not insuring the building to the value that we think it should be.
And Doug, it can be, sorry to interrupt, but it can be a moving target, right? I mean, I think what'll happen is during the course of the year or the policy term, the business can grow and change, and when that happens, what was appropriate when the policy was bound may no longer be appropriate 9 or 10 months later when a loss happens, and they go, geez, when we bound the policy, that was before we executed this big deal, and all of a sudden we're much larger than we were, and now the co-insurance has kicked in and we're not getting paid what we thought we should have been owed.
Right.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
Ian,
a
that's a very good
great
point, Ian. And just to touch on that again, yes, the co-insurance evaluation is done at the time of loss. So yes, you need to continue evaluating your business and the size of your business. If we're speaking about a building, we don't expect a building to appreciate much. But if we're speaking about cannabis stock, as Ian was discussing, if your business grew drastically, your cannabis stock is not going to be evaluated the same way you had while purchasing the policy. So yes, you need to reevaluate that as the policy goes.
And something else made me think of it too, George, when you're talking about the different property that's covered, how often is property covered once it's mobile? Like once it leaves the operator's facility, you know, who covers it then, you guys?
Well, the property policy would cover you within your premises and within 100 feet of your premises. That's the coverage that is provided for business personal property, which includes as well the stock evaluation. So the coverage for under the property policy is going to be based on only at the premises or 100 feet from the premises. If there is any kind of other circumstances that you have that you want it to be covered, then there is coverage for property in transit, and that's a different coverage other than the property that we are speaking about here.
Got it. Just something to note, because a lot of times I've seen in the marketplace, you know, someone gets a large shipment of trim or flour or oil or whatever it might be, and it leaves the manufacturer, the processor's property. And I'll question, well, great guys, who's got it covered when it's en route? You know, and they go, well, we're not sure. And it's like, okay, got it. Well, we don't care necessarily, but somebody should know whether it's insured, because if it's not insured, like George referenced before, it's self-insured, which means you cut a check to it. So that's where it's just like, okay, just another question to ask.
Right.
Hey, Kelly, I got one for you though, still on George's topic of kind of the what's covered. What are some of kind of those critical warranties that normally need to really be in place in order for coverage, you know, to be found?
Good question. So in the cannabis insurance space, we do see some unique endorsements that are very common for these types of policies. One is a protective safeguards endorsement. Protective safeguards endorsement essentially lays out things like a fire alarm, sprinkler system, surveillance cameras, things that you would have at your facility that are meant to help prevent losses or to mitigate losses. You would agree in advance to have those particular safeguards at your facility. And it's, you know, sort of a promise that you make to the insurance company, hey, I'm going to maintain the sprinkler system. The consequence would be as if a loss happens, and if there is no sprinkler system at the building, then the loss may not be covered, right? So again, this is something you would definitely want to understand in advance. You don't want to find out after the fire has happened that you may not have coverage because you failed to comply with this warranty in the policy.
And Kelly, isn't it safe to say though, so when I'm asking an operator, when we are asking an operator, hey, do you have central station burglar, central station fire, and they check the box, yes, you provide a certain premium or a rate that is probably less than if they're checking no. I mean, and so that comes into play, right? I mean, if you talk about fair, you would probably price it differently if they didn't have all these risk measurements, correct?
That's right. You know, so similar to co-insurance, it's a decision that the policyholder or broker can make together about how much coverage they want. These protective safeguards, again, it's a way for the policyholder to partner with the insurance company to reduce the risk and also to potentially reduce their premium, right? So it's not, you know, that we want to have some kind of gotcha after a loss happens, you know, we're not going to pay your claim. It's rather we want to partner with the policyholder, try to prevent losses from happening. These protective safeguards are a measure to do that. So that it's really it's about an agreement and a partnership between the policyholder and the company.
I get it. Ian, anything kind of to add?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that people should approach insurance the way that you approach other business contracts. Insurance is a contract just like any other, right? And you know, when folks who are listening to this, who are business owners, enter into contracts with other parties, they read them carefully. You know, they vet them, they redline them, they do all the stuff. And for some reason in insurance, they tend not to do that. not to read the policy and to trust that everything will be okay. And, I understand if if you have a homeowner's policy or an auto policy with Geico or something, that's one thing. But a cannabis specific property policy is quite something else. And these are, for the most part, manuscript forms. Golden Bear is certainly an exception, being an admitted product in California. But they change, and many of these policies are unique. And so when we're talking about warranties and endorsements in the policy around protective safeguards, theft and robbery, protections, maybe you have a manufacturing extraction warranty or a violation of law or compliant, active license compliance, all of these things that can play into whether or not and the extent to which something's covered. It's really got to be a conversation between you and the broker and the carrier to make sure that you're compliant. And what you can't just do is say, okay, well, I'm compliant with the regulations. I'm compliant with my license, because oftentimes these policies are much more restrictive than just, what's required under the state or local regulations. And I think, unfortunately, I've seen a number of times the last couple of years where, there's been a surprise and there's no coverage because, somebody doesn't have a motion sensor in a certain part of the building, or something of that nature, which may not be required under the regs, but is specifically required under a warranty in the policy that they just never read.
It's a really good point. You cannot assume that these are standard policies because they're, by and large, they're not. Ian used the term of art there, a manuscript form. Again, that just means a unique form that the insurance carrier created to address a specific need. And there are a lot of these manuscripted forms in the cannabis insurance space.
No, absolutely, gentlemen. That was a great add, Ian, because I get that quite a bit where they say, well, listen, that's not in the regs. And I go, I got it. The insurance is stricter than the regs, and guess what? If you want insurance, you have to fulfill some of the requirements of the various carriers, or they simply won't insure you. I mean, it's as simple as that. But anyhow, well, anything else to add, George, on that piece? Because I was going to then move to the specifics, kind of where Ian alluded to, or didn't allude to, he stated, theft and fire are kind of the driving losses. Anything before we move on, George?
I'll just touch on one thing, which is the valuation of plants, because that is a question that all of the growers here, the growers owning businesses, would have that question. So what is the price of the plant if we have a plant that is damaged, say a covered cause of loss? What is the value of that plant? So we got together with experts in the industry to find out what is the value of that plant at this age, because you definitely will not be able to sell a vegetative plant or pre-flowering plant or a plant that just into flower. So you're not going to be able to sell that. It's damaged plants. So at that point in time, we created a per plant value that is incorporated in your policy. If you buy insurance from Golden Bear, you'll see a paper that says, here is the value per plant at the time of loss. If this plant is a clone, it has a value. If it's a vegetative plant, it has a different value. Pre-flowering plants and flowering plants would have different values. Harvested plants and trim, everything is covered when we speak about the value of that plant at the time of loss. So again, as Kelly and Ian said, it's a manuscript policy which we created for you. So we exactly know what your needs are in the industry, and we created that specific per plant value for you to be able to rest in mind and don't have a problem when we say that you have a loss. There's going to be no dispute at what is the value of the plant. It is set in your policy.
Right, George, but what if, like right now, we're seeing a tremendous downward pressure in pricing of flower, outdoor, indoor grow? I mean, what happens if your limit, let's just say, for the flowering plant is twice what is really in the marketplace right now, what someone can sell it for? Will you still give them that what's listed on the policy, or will you give them kind of market value?
That's an excellent question, and the answer to that is definitely the market value. So you get up to the per plant value would say that for plants this is something different. But if we're speaking, I think we're speaking here, Doug, about the poundage of finished products. So here if my limit on the policy says, let's say $2,000, and the market value is 1,000, you get 1,000. You don't get it's the minimum between two things: the value that we have on the policy, which is because it says up to this value, or the current market value for that poundage of flower.
So just a subtle but important, nuance, everyone. And I think this also dovetails nicely what Ian said too, is you have to look at where pricing is, where construction costs are. I mean, after so many of the fires a few years ago, I mean, you couldn't get building materials. And so that's something where your building limit should go up. I mean, it'd be nice if they went down at some point. I just don't know if that's a reality of life, but anyhow, so it's something that you really should look at least annually. But anyhow, all right, so let's talk, what's the topic here? Let's talk theft. Kelly, run us through, some of the drivers of theft, kind of who's to blame, different types of theft. Go get them.
Sure, got a couple of things to say here. So, we've adjusted hundreds of cannabis insurance claims, and as Ian mentioned at the top of the presentation, theft or attempted theft is probably the most common type of loss by far. And so, what does that look like? It can be just an average criminal, sometimes stupid criminal, I call them, the guy with a crowbar who thinks he's going to break in and get a lot of weed and money. Those are usually not that successful. They end up damaging the door, breaking a window or something like that. Oftentimes they don't end up getting much product, but that could still be a covered claim, of course. There's still going to be damage to the building that your insurance company can assist with. Some of the more successful thefts seem to be inside jobs. That's very difficult to prove. But there are these thieves that seem to know exactly what they're doing. They quickly move to where the product is stored. They know how to evade some of the protective safeguards that are in place. They know where the cameras are. And so those seem to be the successful thefts.
Kelly,
yes.
Kelly, if I can interrupt you, I mean, if you guys would take a look at the screen, look at the two pictures Justin put up. The one on the right literally has someone with a firearm to security's head on the right. And then on the left, and I think one of our moderators provided these, is there's a firearm that's hidden underneath the UPS, excuse me, I didn't mean to say that UPS, underneath the package, and so it could be serious stuff. But anyhow, I figured I would jump to that, Kelly.
Yeah, no, Doug, I can comment on, sort of provide a little context around both of these situations without identifying, of course, what who these are, but I'll say that they both happen in California, and the one on the left is and it shows how people get into the facility, right? And these were both situations where the intruders, got in, through deception or by a mistake. On the left, it was deception. It was a delivery person that had a gun, hidden behind a package. Of course, he wasn't a delivery person, but he looked like one to the operator. On the right, you've got a security guard that should never have been in that situation. That the guard should have stayed, put. This was overnight, and he was supposed to be in the security room. There's a panic button in there that was never pushed, but the guard left the facility, and these intruders were waiting. And again, whether or not either one of these were inside jobs, there's some question about it. But as Kelly said, sometimes that can be hard to prove.
Yeah, and so both of these criminals gained access to the facility through different methods. I've also seen claims where our insured manager is surveilled and approached outside the facility. Right? They've watched this guy's habits. They know what time he shows up to work every morning, that kind of thing. And they were waiting for him, right, with a gun at the door, and forced him to open the safe. So it can happen that way too. Something to think about. Even before you're at the facility, you need to think about your personal safety surroundings. A little bit about the coverage issues specific to theft. We talked earlier about different kind of warranties that are on the policies. Many of these cannabis specific policies have a safe warranty, or they talk about vault room warranty. I just want to talk about those briefly. So in the TOPA policy, for example, there is a warranty that says that your cannabis stock has to be stored in a safe or vault room. and there's some language in the policy about what that means. Here's some pictures of what a vault room could look like. Again, that's a promise that the policyholder makes to try to prevent a theft loss from happening, or if one happens, to prevent the severity, right? You know, the product will be more secure if it's in a safe or vault room. If those requirements are not met, again, there's a potential that the loss would not be paid. And an interesting illustration of this that also calls back to something that my colleagues were saying earlier in this presentation about how the insurance policy can be stricter than the regs. We had a loss up in the Pacific Northwest dispensary, and there was a after hours theft. You know, the thieves broke in, they stole some product from various locations around the dispensary, one of which was a refrigerator display case. And this was a locked refrigerator. You know, that's how they were storing their product after hours. There was, you know, some beverages, edibles, things like that in this refrigerated display case. The thieves broke through that, stole stuff out of that display case. The claim came in, and we looked at this safe warranty, and the insured made an argument that, well, this locked refrigerator is a safe. You know, I call that a safe. And you know, the word safe wasn't specifically defined in the policy. There was some, you know, just the word itself wasn't specifically decided, you know, specifically defined. So we looked into it a little bit more, tried to determine, you know, could this locked refrigerator be a safe? And one of the things the insured pointed to was, well, that's what the Cannabis Control Board in my state says we do with product. We're supposed to lock it in a refrigerator that satisfies the regulators. But as I alluded to, our policy language was more stringent than that, because it went on to say, well, the safe has to be at least 800 pounds, it has to be bolted to the floor, all these other, you know, requirements. So regardless of whether we considered that locked refrigerator a safe, it didn't meet the strict policy language. You know, it wasn't bolted to the floor, it didn't meet the weight requirements, and so there was no coverage for the product that was stolen out of that locked refrigerator.
That's a great point, Kelly. I mean, truly, operators, you have to flip your hat on backwards and stop thinking about the rules and regs of wherever your jurisdiction is, and really just put on the insurance risk management hat. You know, and the carriers will help, the brokers will help, et cetera. But yeah, they're quite different. As you can see too, one could be a vault, one could be like a DEA cage, because I think the premise is you want to slow them down, the criminals. If someone has enough time, correct me if I'm wrong, but you could get into anything if you have enough time. So these are just measures, hopefully that can slow them down, hopefully deterrence, video cameras, you know, things of that nature. Ian, George, anything else to add kind of to the world of theft, if you will?
I would say that there's, you know, somewhat of a misperception again around cash. You know, certainly cash can be stolen, and cash is, you know, if it's available, it will be stolen. But cash is often stored in a safe, and safes can be very difficult to get into. You know, and like Kelly said, you know, if they're heavy and they're bolted to the ground, you know, unless they come in with heavy drilling equipment and stuff, they're not getting into safes. So that's not where, you know, many of the thefts are happening. They're happening with the storage cages, to some extent with the vault rooms, and, you know, they're going after certainly the oils, right? The concentrates and finished, you know, or harvested cannabis material. Maybe it's flour in bags. In some cases, you know, you'll rip up growing plants. You know, that happens too. And here on the screen we've got this is from Oakland, rising after the civil unrest in May and June of 2020. And, you know, here you've got, you know, a number of people who had, you know, sort of free reign in this facility for some period of time without an adequate police response. And you can see that they did rip up living plants, that they're, you know, it's still in the growing medium there on the left. But, you know, and this it occurs to me that, and maybe I'll throw this out to Kelly and George, theft versus vandalism, or damage caused by theft, and is it vandalism or not, right? That's a question that sometimes pops up as to whether it's covered.
Vandalism is one of those interesting coverage issues, I guess I'll say, because what is vandalism is sometimes in the eye of the beholder, right? And even broader than cannabis specific insurance policies, sometimes we've seen illegal grow operations on a homeowner's policy or something like that, or renters, landlord's policy, and they will trash the place and they'll claim that was vandalism, right? So it's an interesting topic for sure.
Right. And I want to add one thing about the thefts. We've seen major cash losses earlier this year about an employee being approached by an unknown number, and this unknown number is pretending to be, oh, hi, I'm the CEO, and you're going to get a great bonus if you comply with what I'm going to say. And that employee is the one who has access to the cash, and what happens is that they start to persuade him to, oh, show me the videos, show me what is going on here, and show me what happened to that. How much is in the safe right now? And here we go. We need the money to be sent to us right now. That poor employee just takes the money and goes and hands over the money to somebody who he do not know, he had never seen in his life. And here we go, there we have a big theft of money cases. This is what we see commonly in speaking about money losses.
Well, and that brings up a good point. I mean, when someone voluntarily parts with the money, is it stolen?
Well, I would not argue if it was stolen or not, but if any trick happens to any of your employees causing money to be taken from them and they part with the money, like they agreed to part with the money with that person, unfortunately, that is not covered under the policy. This is a risk that we've been seeing multiple times. It's not a covered cause of loss. However, it happens a lot, and we've seen that earlier this year, like by Jan or Feb, and the frequency decreased by now. But this is one of the items that we've seen frequently by the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and George, I agree. And in addition to voluntary, innocent but voluntary parting of money by employee, maybe because they were fooled, any kind of misrepresentation, fraud, concealment, something that's intentional by the employee, maybe had nothing to do with the business owner, but the employee is somehow dishonest. That's also generally not covered under property policies.
Right.
And that would probably be where you need to get a specific crime policy to really address that, which is just a little bit more niche for another call. But if you think about it, operators out there and other brokers, I mean, if you have a risk, I mean, there's an insurance that you could probably get for it in cannabis. There might not just be as many resources, et cetera, but pretty much we can insure, I believe, pretty much anything. Anyhow, well, okay, so I'm looking at the time. How about we move on then and we talk about fire? So, excuse me. Yeah, correct. So theft, now we got fire left. Who wants to take that lead, George?
Okay, I'll just touch on that really quick. So speaking about fire is the second most common cause of loss. Mainly where we see that happening is with growers, and this is most commonly caused by a bulb burst. And can you please, yeah, exactly, thank you. No. So this is most commonly caused by a bulb burst. And the most common cause of the bulb burst is the incompatibility of the bulb with the ballast. So if you can see in that picture really quick, there is the bulb and here's the ballast. And if these two are not compatible with each other, that causes a lot of bulb bursts, and this causes fire. Again, while the HID bulbs are highly maintenance bulbs, so we see a lot of like bad maintenance taking place with growers. While changing the bulb, some grease and oil might be placed on the bulb, and that causes as well bulb bursts. And that happens very often because they are high maintenance, and we would highly recommend switching these to LED lights. And one last thing that I wanted to say as well is that we have seen multiple cases where these fires were got under control, even if they start. And the two things that affect the fire is that plants were properly distanced from each other. That's the first thing. And there was a proper fire sprinkler system. So if these combinations happen in a facility, we expect that you can get over a fire and control it right away if that is the situation that you have at your end. And I'll leave the next slide about the manufacturers in your hands.
Well, and there's also the smoke damage, which can be critical. And you touched on it, George, though, when you have separation and maybe if you compartmentalize several grow rooms, because I've seen multi-million-dollar losses where the actual fire damage was modest, 20,000, but the smoke damage was $500,000. I mean, and then you get into the crop side and it really can get nasty. So the question is, hey, who are you really training and allowing to service those bulbs? It sounds like the most basic, innocuous thing to do, but yet it's one of the leading drivers of fire claims in the cannabis industry. I mean, it's a big deal.
And if I could make, one recommendation, which would be to document what happens with this equipment. So that means when you buy it, make sure that you keep the receipts and you know who you're sourcing the bulbs and the housing or the ballast. If you're going to have it installed, make sure that it's through a licensed electrician and you have an agreement with them. And if you're going to be changing out bulbs, make sure that it's, pursuant to manufacturer recommendations and consistent with the product warranties. If you do that, then the chances of a fire, it's never bulletproof, but it goes way, way, way down.
And Ian said in agreement, I would strongly suggest in writing, because we've got to be able to follow who's at fault. I mean, if the electrical contractor is potentially at fault, we need to allow our insurance companies to go get him or her, because that's going to, in essence, reduce your claim. So it really, everything in writing, no more handshakes. I hate to say it, but in writing.
I'll just add too that when a fire loss happens, it's critical that you notify the insurance company right away. We unfortunately see a lot of late reporting in our cannabis book. A couple days, a week goes by, that may not sound like a big deal. And I understand the policyholder probably is really focused on getting their operations cleaned up. Maybe they didn't initially think about insurance, but if I could just put in a plug for that, because we want to get there as quickly as possible, document the scene, secure any evidence, because we talk about maybe going after the people that installed the light. Maybe there's actually a manufacturing defect. If we don't have the opportunity to secure that evidence, the trail can go cold. Evidence can be lost, and we may not be able to pursue that recovery. And that's not just in the insurance company's interest, but it's in the policyholder's interest too. If we're able to recover from a third party that did something wrong, then we would be able to refund the insurance deductible and possibly also include uncovered portions of the claim in our recovery. So again, it's a partnership between the carrier and the policyholder. And again, if you have a loss, please let us know about it right away.
Hey, Kelly, that's great. And that's a wonderful segue. Ian, I think the last question was from you, and it dovetails nicely. Hey, what's the claim process like? Oh, actually, why don't you walk us through this manufacturing issue, and then let's get into how the claims process works.
Yeah, sure. So we certainly haven't seen the same frequency of fires with manufacturing, but in terms of severity, they're every bit as bad. And certainly the potential for injuries and deaths, I think, are a bit higher on the manufacturing side. So you've got certainly, closed loop extraction systems that use volatile solvents, and you've got construction issues that are around the equipment. And so here on the screen, this is actually a hemp facility, not a regulated marijuana facility, and you see some extraction equipment there, kind of in the middle, kind of upper part of the screen with a spill. That's pentane solvent that if you advance the slide, there was a static discharge and it went up and the entire facility burned down. And one of the issues in this particular matter is the extent to which there was an obligation to have the equipment properly guarded and in a proper room Sometimes these are called C1D1 or C1D2 rooms, which is part of the National Electric Code. Not all policies require that specificity, but most policies are going to have some language around compliance with building codes, for example, and many local building codes are going to require anything that has, dangerous solvents to be in a specialized room that has protections such as static resistance, positive pressure, ventilation, things like that. And so that, again, can invalidate coverage and can also cause, higher exposure for significant injury claims if you have employees or others who, may be around, hazards like this. But I would say that, in terms of the number of claims, not that high compared to the lighting fires, but when they happen, they tend to be pretty severe.
Got it. All right. So a claim has happened, theft, fire, you name it, because it's really pretty universal. So first things first, Ian, walk us through it.
Right. So the claims process is, it varies certainly by the type of claim and how complicated factually the claim investigation is going to be. But there's a few things that every policyholder, every insured person needs to keep in mind. And most policies will have language that actually specifically relates to your duties when there's a loss. So, for example, if a crime has been committed, like a theft or something, or vandalism, you may have an obligation to notify the police. You may have an obligation to provide prompt notice to the carrier. And, I think, in my opinion, the sooner the better in terms of notice. Like Kelly was saying, it's in your interest to have the carrier send out investigators or loss adjusters or field investigators, very quickly after the loss, so they can start taking inventory, start taking statements, start taking photographs, preserve evidence. Every carrier is going to ask you to provide a loss description. That can be everything from a very detailed, spreadsheet that you've maintained, or maybe it's information, that's maintained on metric, or it can be, in some cases, a handwritten list of things that have been damaged. But they're going to want some sort of loss description. You're supposed to take reasonable steps to prevent further damage. So, for example, if there's other equipment that's being exposed to the elements, or there's a damaged door that could lead to further theft, you should be taking reasonable steps immediately to try to protect your property from further harm. And then also, you may be asked to be given to give what's called a sworn statement of loss, and this would be like a more formal statement in terms of what was damaged. That's has a kind of a verification aspect to it, so that you're providing a higher level of verification. And then in some cases, depending on how the investigation goes, the carrier may need a better understanding and some additional context around the loss. Maybe it's around the facts and circumstances of the accident, or maybe it's around what's being claimed or the damage valuation. And you may be asked to give what's called an examination under oath. And this is a procedure that almost all policies have, where you would have the obligation to sit down with somebody on behalf of the carrier who's going to ask you questions under oath. And usually there's a court reporter there. It's sort of like a deposition, but that's going to provide the carrier with some additional information. That doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. But I guess my overall advice is that people should be thinking of the relationship with your insurance company as a partnership, the way that Kelly mentioned. The more you treat it like a partnership and the more it's collaborative, in my experience, I've been doing this now 25+ years, these claims go faster and smoother. Typically, the carrier will also, like George said, retain experts as needed, like maybe a forensic accountant who can help you to go through your financials, because sometimes, maybe you haven't done this before, and they can help to organize the information in a way that the loss accounting is necessary under the policy. In terms of timing, claims, they run the gamut, but you should definitely not expect to get a check overnight. I mean, this takes days, weeks, or even months, depending on the loss, and depending on whether, for example, business income loss is claimed, where we would need to get into the books and records and look to see what the history is like and be able to evaluate that more complicated kind of forensic accounting analysis. But if you treat it like a partnership, cooperate, and ask questions where needed, and if you need to hire a lawyer, certainly do that. That can be helpful too in some cases, to help navigate the claim. But hopefully it's not too much of a painful experience.
Awesome. Not awesome about the claim process. I mean, no one enjoys it, but it's insurance. It's there for, when something unpredictable happens. Kelly, George, anything you guys want to add to the claims process? Because other than that, we'll get to our best ways to protect your operation and Q&A.
I think Ian explained it well.
I
Okay.
agree to that.
All right. Ian is a rookie, first time doing this. Okay, got it. Just kidding. Okay, so hey, George, why don't we start with you then? So what are one or two of your takeaways for the audience, in relationship to large property losses?
Okay, the first thing is that I'd like to set a perspective of what insurance is. A lot of cases where our clients do not know really insurance would get to submit a claim where they think that this might be covered, which for example, I've seen building owners, their tenant moved out and it took them a while to release that location without any damage, without any incident that had happened to that location. And am I online? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
We can hear you.
So that's when we get and we find that this is just the normal business process. As a landlord, you can't expect that you might wait for a while before releasing your location. This is not a claim. This is not an incident that had happened that disrupted your business. It is the normal process of your operation. The other thing that I want to stress on, and I think we cannot stress on that enough, is the notification of the claim, the proper notice and the timely notice of a claim. As Kelly and Ian stressed on before, I'd like to add to that. You have to notify us of a claim once you are aware of a claim. And that's not just for us to evaluate, it's for the benefit of every party to that contract. You would have a claim that you want your insurance company to attend to right away. And we at the same time would, as Ian and Kelly said, we would secure the evidence. We would be able to assist you in recovering anything if it's recoverable. So that is a very important thing. Sometimes you would get a claim and you would say, okay, there's a third party that said, I'm fine, I'm gonna pay for that loss. No, notify your insurance company, even though the third party agreed to pay. The thought of, oh, I don't want to submit a claim under my insurance policy to avoid the premium from going up is not the right thing. You purchase your insurance policy for a reason, and that reason is the peace of mind. So the first thing that comes to my mind is notify the insurance company as soon as you know of any incident, whether it's going to be covered, whether it's not going to be covered, whether it is pursuing a third party or not pursuing a third party. Just give us the prompt notice. And that's about it from my end.
Got it. All right. So I think you heard that loud and clear from George, Kelly, and Ian. Hey, report those claims. And even if you don't report them to the carrier, report them to your broker to really talk about it and then move it to the next level. So either one. Thank you, George. Kelly, how about you? What's your one or two takeaways you'd like for someone to remember from this conversation?
Well, my piece of advice for preventing losses that could kill your cannabis business would be to switch to LED lights. It's easy for me to say, I know they're expensive. There are reasons why some growers perhaps prefer HID lamps, but the large losses we've seen, the 6- and 7-figure losses, have been cultivation fires, and they've all been HID lamps. So that'd be the one thing I would do.
Awesome. And then if you went to LEDs, you're going to lower the temperature, lower HVAC costs. I mean, there's some other benefits, but again, that's a different conversation. But okay, LEDs all day long for Kelly. Ian, how about you in closing?
Closing advice would be documentation. Think about documentation in advance of something happening, so that you can go to immediately to the product receipts, the loss inventories, the contracts that you have, whatever it may be. Document, number one. Number two, I would say that you should have, cannabis companies don't always have what we call a risk manager, like other companies would have. Large companies would have a risk manager, perhaps, who has an insurance background, whose job is specifically to, among other things, deal with insurance claims. We recognize that the cannabis industry is still growing and many operators don't have that person. Nevertheless, there should be someone designated who is going to be responding on behalf of losses to with the broker and with the carrier, and perhaps bone up a little bit on what your policies say and what that communication should look like. And then the third thing would be again, just thinking ahead about what can go wrong. Many companies will do what we call a what if scenario, and that can be everything from a full-blown engineering analysis where you have experts come in and look at all your processes and ask basically what if this happens, then that, what if this happens, how do we respond? Or it can be a discussion over a beer with your colleagues and you jot down some ideas on a cocktail napkin. I mean, anything is better than nothing, but you should be asking those what if questions.
I like it. So what if questions, which I think are healthy for everything. I mean, that's risk management. That's really 101. And then also, I think I can say for Ian, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. I mean, that's another way I like to say it.
If it's not documented, it's hard to prove that it happened if it's disputed.
There you go. There you go. And then I'm going to take one to close for me. And mine it was reiterated too. It's like, hey, your insurance renews once a year, right? It does. So at least once a year, take some time and review it with your broker and ask questions and look at what's excluded. And if they can't answer it, have them find out the answer. So you really should take the time. And then to answer one of the questions, I believe it was Jenna. Jenna chimed in with a question that dovetails with this, meaning, hey, have we seen co-insurance increase because of post-COVID and inflation? And the answer simply is yes, because that building that might be $1 million now to repair it in like quality, like kind, it could be 1.2, 1.3 million. And that could be enough to get you into co-insurance penalties, which could snake bite you. So absolutely. So then that goes right back to, you should be looking at this stuff at least once a year. I'd say twice, but I don't want to ask too much, once a year. I think that's it from all of us. A big thank you, Kelly, Ian, George, and Justin. Always a thank you, brother, for your tireless help with the CCIA. We appreciate you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to the panelists. We put the contact information for these folks on the screen if you would like to contact them, or feel free to just reach out to CCIA staff after the fact, and we'll definitely make sure you guys are in contact. Like we mentioned at the beginning of this call, this will be recorded. Well, this is recorded and will be available on the website shortly, as is all of the past risk management webinars, white papers, best practices. There's definitely a lot of resources just right on the resource landing page of the website. So I'd like to thank Doug, Kelly, Ian, and George for their time, and definitely encourage anybody who's not a member to join, to be able to get resources like this in a timely manner, and be a part of the conversation. If you're a risk manager listening to this and would like to be on the risk management committee, definitely reach out to us, or if you'd like to be on any of our 8 various committees that work on this important educational content to make sure that our members and our overall community are getting what they need to survive, which is during a rather difficult time here in California. So we thank everybody for their time, and we look forward to seeing everybody on our next educational webinar.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.